So you're thinking about downsizing your home. This is definitely the video for you. We're gonna go through all the different ways that you can downsize between, buying first, selling first, contingent, keeping as a rental, all those kind of things. A few different tips about decluttering and downsizing in general, and then also the financial aspect of things. How much house do you think you can buy for the downsize? Should you pay cash with the proceeds for the other one? Should you get a mortgage? All those kind of things. So if you're looking to learn more about downsizing your home, definitely stick around. We're gonna get after it right now. Hey, if this is your first time to the channel and you want to know all there is to know about living in King County, Washington, or the real estate market here in our area, then hit the subscribe button, tap the bell for notifications. That way you can be the first to be notified of a new video. I'm Brad Decater. I own the Decater Home Team, and we get calls and texts and emails from people just like you every day who are looking to make their move, whether it's downsizing like you, or upgrading, or cross-country moves, relocating. But we love to help people out whether you're one day or a couple years away. So all the contact information is below, so feel free to reach out and connect with us. So without further ado, the video. We're doing downsizing. So I want to start with the different ways that you can downsize, then just a couple of tips and some financing stuff at the very end. So stick around for that part. It's going to be very interesting to talk about the financing side, so you're not going to want to miss that. So the different ways that you can downsize. So really there's only 3 or 4 different versions, but then each version has a couple of nuances and sideways that you can actually do it too. So you can either buy first, sell first, do a contingent, so that means you're doing it at the same time, or you can keep it as a rental. So the first one is buy first, sell second. This is actually my favorite option for someone who's planning on selling the home. If they know they're going to sell it, if they're not going to do the option where they keep it as a rental, then this is my favorite option. So quick overview of how this one would work. You would be taking your time to shop. So you'd be shopping, seeing houses, identifying the property that you actually want to buy. Once you find the house you want to buy over here, you're going to make an offer on it, you're going to purchase it, you're going to buy it. Once you close on the property, you're going to then move yourself and all of your stuff that you want to keep into the new home, your downsized home. Now this property is sitting here vacant now that you've done your move. Now we're gonna go ahead and prep this property, get it nice and ready for the market, and sell it on the market and cash out. So it is my favorite way. There's a lot of benefits to it. The first one is that you get to take your time on the shopping portion. The fact that you can just take your time, it could take you a few weeks to find this house, or it could take you 3 to 5 years. It doesn't really matter. You just shop for as long as it takes till you find your home. There's nothing pushing you because you still have this house. Second benefit is that you only have to move one time. In some of the other options like selling first, in some cases you have to move twice. You may have to get into a rental property while you look for your next house, or some sort of short-term solution that's gonna cause a little bit more stress. Whereas this one, you only move one time. So you take your time shopping, you buy your house, you move in slowly over time, all the stuff you want, organize, decorate, and then you do this one. So it's definitely, I would say, the least stressful for the client, you, the homeowner. The only downside really to this version is that a lot of people can't do it because they need the money. So the kicker is, the downside is that if you're getting a mortgage, for example, you need to qualify for both mortgages at the same time. So financially, you have to be in a pretty good spot to be able to do this. Or a lot of people, maybe it's not the mortgage they need, maybe they're gonna pay cash, but in general, they do need the equity out of this property. In that case, this option, buying first and then selling second, would not work because they need to sell. They need to get the money. But option 1.2, another one of my favorites, because buying first and selling second is such a much better process, this option would be a bridge loan. Let's just say that you own this house for $1 million. That's what it's worth today, and you don't owe a mortgage on it. So a lot of these downsizing people that I work with, this is kind of the general scenario. They've had this house for 20 years. Maybe they bought it for $250,000 way back when. Now it's up to $1 million, but their mortgage is already paid off, or it's close to paid off. Maybe they owe $75,000 on it, but for this example, let's say it's paid off. So they have about $1 million in equity here, and maybe they just retired, or they can't qualify for this other new house, right? So in that case, a bridge loan would be a great option. They can get a good chunk of money. Maybe they want $500,000. Let's just get a $500,000 loan against this property, get the cash, then we can go buy this house for either cash, or we get a loan on the property and that's our down payment, whatever it may be. But the bridge loan will help bridge the gap between buying and selling the property. if you're someone who absolutely needs to get the equity out of this house first. One of my favorite benefits to this option is that you're also going to be selling a vacant house. So the fact that you actually moved into your dream home, your downsized home already, is really great, because then this house is vacant and is a lot easier to get prepped for. So it can be a lot of work to prep the property, and when you live there, it's just a lot more difficult, because obviously there's the decluttering, all that kind of stuff. There might be repairs and maintenance stuff after an inspection. And then, just prepping it itself, getting it clean, staged, all that stuff that we do for getting a property ready is enough. And then once we're on the market, it's showings, it's open houses. You got to be kind of very available, keeping the house in a really good condition while it's on the market. So for that reason, it's just a lot easier for both parties, honestly, to sell a vacant house. So again, you don't have to rush to shop. You take your time in shopping. You get to sell the vacant house, and you only have to move once. Those are the benefits. The only downside is if you can't qualify, you may need to get the bridge loan. So another way you can do it is to sell first, buy second. In this scenario, that one, you have some sort of gap in the middle where you have to have some sort of short-term solution of where you're going to live. So that's why most of the time it's going to be either, it could be a hotel, but most of the time like a short-term rental, either an Airbnb, maybe a month-to-month lease, or a 6-month lease, or maybe even a year lease. The downside of this is that you move twice. So that's the biggest downside. Moving is rough anyway, especially moving in a downsizing type move. It's even harder because, again, you have more stuff. If you're moving to an upgrade move, you have a bigger house to fill, so you kind of just can take everything. In this case, you're downsizing, so you probably have to get rid of some stuff. So a little bit more difficult there. Now, the benefit of selling first and buying second is going to be that you know exactly how much money you're working with. Like, you know exactly to the penny what you made. You're selling the property, it closes, you get your proceeds into your bank account, and then you start figuring out your shopping process for buying the property. So you know exactly what you have. So that's one of the upsides to selling first. There's a couple of downsides. Number one is that you, of course, have to prep the property and sell the home while you live there. So a little bit more difficult, again, than selling a vacant property, but definitely possible. The second downside is that you have to move twice, but that's where I'll stop and say that there is one nuance that you could end up moving once in this sell first, buy second option. So you could get what's called a seller rent back period. Seller rent back period is exactly what it sounds like. It's where the seller, you, can actually stay in your property for an extended amount of time, depending on what the contract says. Typically, it's going to be 30 or 60 days. In most cases, it's not going to be 90 days because the buyer usually wants to get in there. It'd be cool because you can actually stay in your home. So you could do this whole strategy, sell first, know exactly what you're going to make, and then buy, and still only move once if you got, for example, a 60-day rent back period. So you can actually stay in your home for 60 days, use that time to shop and buy a new house. So that's the benefit, is that you could wrap it into one move. The downside of that option is that now adding a little bit more stress and a little bit more push as far as timing goes to get that property. There's something making you make this move ASAP, whereas the first options, you kind of take your time and just buy the house, the right house, when it comes up. In this case, you have a timeline. You know you have to buy in this many days, so you better find the right house. So that's the downside. Third option with a few variations again is going to be doing it contingent, either buying or selling contingent. You can do it both ways. I'll start with selling contingent because it's actually my least favorite option. I don't think it's a very good one for most people. Selling contingent is putting your house in the market and selling it, and when you get a contract, it's going to be contingent upon you finding a suitable housing for yourself, so you buying a property. It's not done very often in our market right now. It hasn't been done for quite a few years. Most buyers are not going to be interested in buying a house or getting in contract for a house that is contingent upon them finding a new house. And that's because they may not find a house, so they're not really guaranteed the house. The seller rent back period, where like they close on the house and you stay there for a few days or a few months, that's better because at least they know they own the house. They actually do own title, they close and they own it, and you're just staying there. In this case, they're not really guaranteed that they get the house. So it's kind of like they may have been shopping for a year and they finally found their dream home and they make an offer. It's your home. You guys accept the offer contingent on you finding a house. You could not find a house and 3 months later just say, we didn't find a house, so we're not selling anymore. So for that reason, the buyers usually don't love this option. So I don't typically recommend it, but it is an option. Now, buying contingent is the same idea, but the opposite. So we're going to be shopping for a house. The benefit is that you get to take your time again. So take your time shopping. Whenever you find the right house, you make an offer on it, and the offer is going to be contingent upon you selling this property. Now, this is a pretty common practice in real estate, very common, done a lot. It's a little bit harder to do in a very, very hot market. So the springs of like 2021, 2022, that was pretty crazy. Most sellers, other sellers, were not accepting contingent offers, so it was difficult. But in most times in history, buying contingent is very common. So again, you buy the property contingent upon this one selling, just meaning that it needs to sell before you can close on this one. So the thing about this one is that they're happening at the same time. So you're literally in escrow at the same time for most of the portion, and they're going to close usually within about 3 days of each other. Typically, you close this one, so you get the money. 3 days later, close this one, and then you move in. Now, my biggest piece of advice. So this is, besides buying first and selling second, this is the most common way that I would do it. With the bridge loan now coming in, that's going to be, I would definitely recommend doing it with the bridge loan as opposed to doing the contingent, but it has to have more cost to it, so it just depends. But the contingent route is great. The one thing I have to say about it is you have to prepare your home first that you're selling before you start doing the shopping process on the purchase. That's the key. So a lot of people, they see the house they want, they get excited, they want to buy it, but they don't realize that you actually have to list your home for sale. If you're going to make an offer contingent upon the sale of this one, the person that's accepting this offer wants to make sure your house is going to the market pretty soon. So the contract says 5 days. It can be negotiated, but usually it's about 5-10 days that this property needs to be on the market. So for that reason, I always start with prepping this house first before we shop. So that would be the decluttering, the staging, getting it completely ready. The only thing we wouldn't do would be like photos and videos and stuff and marketing, because we have 5 days to do that. So benefits, you only need to move once, which is great. It's happening at the same time, so there's very little overlap as far as like mortgages go or paying for rentals and stuff like that. So that's great. Downside, stressful process. 2 escrows, you have this deal to worry about, of course, and then when you sell your house, you need to make sure it sells. Like if it doesn't sell, you're not buying this house, so that's stressful. All right, that wraps up that. Next one is going to be actually keeping your primary or keeping your current home as a rental property and becoming an investor, and then actually buying your downsize home to live in as your primary. You need to talk to CPAs and financial advisors. When you're looking at downsizing, there is going to be tax burdens. Typically, if it's the $1 million sale, you're going to have $250,000 or $500,000 of tax-free gain per the tax code if you're single for $250,000, or if you're married $500,000. But there likely will be capital gains tax. There's a lot to think through as far as the purchase price of the house that you're going to buy. Are you going to buy it in cash? Are you going to are you going to get a mortgage on the property? All those kind of things. Another thing that should come into your head, which is why I'm bringing it up, is keeping this property as a rental. If you know this $1 million property can maybe rent out for, let's say, $4,000 a month, that could be part of your retirement plan instead of maybe putting it into some sort of index fund or mutual fund or any sort of stock or any other investment at all that was paying you a specific return. If that return was already kind of ready to go and it made sense on paper with numbers, and you talk to your financial advisor, keeping a property might not be a bad idea, especially for someone who needs cash flow. So maybe their 401k or their other accounts that are set up for retirement are pretty low, and so their actual income, their active income is not going to be very high in retirement. They're not really up to the 4% rule. Then getting cash flow from the real estate might be a good alternative as opposed to taking all the proceeds and putting it into some other investment. The trick is that you obviously, if you're keeping this house, you need to still qualify or have the money for this house. So this is all case-by-case basis. That's why these downsizing and move-up buys, they're really complicated. They just take personal touch. Like you need to find out where the financial position is for the person that you're helping, the seller, and then what's important to them, and a lot of different factors. So when you're buying and selling at the same time, so now we're into the tips area. So we're talking about tips of decluttering, that kind of stuff. The first tip though is, again, focusing on the higher price property. So markets change, right? So if you're doing it at the exact same time, then obviously they don't really change. If it's contingent, it's literally closing 3 days apart, things don't change really. But if you're doing some sort of, buy first, sell second, sell first, buy next, and you're taking your time in between the steps and you're having a short-term rental or something, then the market will have an impact. So the reason why we want to focus on the more expensive one is because it has a bigger impact on the financial part of it. So for example, if the property goes, down 5% in value. If it goes down 5% on $1 million, 50,000, it's a lot more than going down 5% on 500, 25,000. So you can see the market impacts the higher price property more. So your strategy of buying first or selling second, all that stuff, it may depend on what the market's doing. If the market's going up very, very fast, and we feel very confident that's going to continue to happen for the next 5 months or something, and that's like your time window, that would be a different strategy than if the market is significantly decreasing over the next 5 months. Today is the early April right now, and the market has been heating up a lot. So if you're someone who's downsizing, I'd probably advise selling soon, because it's a really good time to sell in springtime, and you usually get multiple offers. It's going to be good. And then if you were someone who was buying, shortly after that, summer is usually like kind of a cool down session. Obviously, winter is usually a cool down section as well. So we'd want to kind of base it around when you're going to get top dollar for the house you're selling. Whereas move up buyers, it's the opposite. So if I'm doing a move up buy, not that this video is about that, but I'm selling, my first house is worth 400 and I want to buy the $1 million house and build my family up. We're having kids, that situation. We want to focus on getting a good deal on the top price property because that's more important. So maybe we want to buy in the winter time here and then wait and sell this one in spring, where we can get the most for that. So anyway, so that's why you do need a personal touch. If you guys are thinking about downsizing anytime in the next couple years, this process takes some strategy, some conversations, some work. So I always recommend for people, it's not a willy-nilly thing like you decide today. Okay, 2 more tips that I forgot. When you're prepping a property for sale, there'll be another video on that, so you guys can find that somewhere else of how I actually prep properties. But just advice for downsizers, because there is usually so much stuff in the house. I would start with the garage and the exterior to get stuff into dump runs, donations, get rid of the stuff you don't need there. And then typically a downsizer is going to have a lot of empty bedrooms that used to be maybe kids' rooms. So I would next go to those rooms because they usually have a lot of trinkets and other stuff that maybe you don't need anymore. Get those cleared out so that the stager can come in and get it nice and ready. So I'll just go room by room from there. Last thing I want to mention is just kind of some financial stuff. So again, I'm not a financial advisor or CPA, so I definitely encourage you guys to reach out to your own. I have some if you need them. But this scenario, downsizing, it is a financial decision. It's not just the house. And so I think it needs to be thought through very, elegantly in figuring out what the plan is. And a lot of times, depending on the age and what's going on in their life, but it's also kind of a retirement plan, or at least it's part of the retirement plan. So it's important to have all the information in front of you and figure out what's the best plan for you. So I want to mention one thing about the second home. So if you're in a position that you could buy it in cash, because if you're selling the $1 million home and buying for 400, and you had no mortgage, then obviously you could buy that in cash. So the question becomes then, should you buy in cash or should you get a mortgage on the property? And that depends on a lot of things. Number one is going to be, I would say, interest rates. What are the interest rates, the mortgage rates on getting this primary residence? If it was at 3% like it was, a year ago, then in most cases, I would still recommend getting a mortgage on the property, at least some mortgage. Maybe it's a 50%, 50% down payment, 50% mortgage. But the thing is that 3% interest rates are just so low. And so if you had, let's say that another $400,000, $500,000 of cash in your pocket from this house, and you invested that into index funds or just anything that's going to return, about 10% annualized returns, which is, a pretty average investment for that kind of investment, then obviously you can see there's a spread there. So you're going to make more money having that invested in something that's going to make 10% because you're only paying 3% for the mortgage. And you still own the whole asset. So like the asset itself, if it's appreciating or depreciating, whatever, that's all going to happen whether you own it in cash or a mortgage. The key here is that you can make a spread on, doing an interest rate arbitrage basically. If you can make 10% over here and you're only borrowing for 3%, then you're making a 7% spread in that scenario. So something to consider, although I know a lot of people like Dave Ramsey, they really love the idea of having no mortgage in retirement, which by the way, I totally get it. In fact, I think I would like to have no mortgage in retirement too. It just depends what the interest rates are at. Right now, them being about 6.5 right now. Maybe it's probably better to just do it in cash. I mean, there's still maybe a little bit of a spread. It also depends on how savvy you are as an investor, if you think you can make outsized returns, or if that 6% that you're paying is, just too much, you'd rather just have the security. That would actually be the final decision, is security and personal preference. So it's not always about numbers when it comes to this kind of stuff. Maybe you just prefer to have no mortgage, and that's way more important than seeing if you can make a better investment with the money that you just got, the lump sum there. So that's all I got for this video. I know it was very, very long. If you stayed till the end, thank you very much. It's probably boring too. But if you did stay to the end, that means that you're pretty serious about learning more about this process. So if you're in Washington State and you're thinking about downsizing, I definitely would love to talk to you. Even if you're a couple years away, we can start the relationship, send you some helpful PDFs, and talk through the process, connect you with CPAs and advisors, financial people that can help you with the plans for retirement as well. So all the contact info is below. Feel free to reach out when you're ready, and we would love to help you make a smooth move.